When you play a Pokemon game, it can be hard to avoid falling into the same old patterns. By the time you're taking on the Elite Four, you'll often find yourself with a party composed of your favorites, the strongest available Pokemon, or a mix. The community has some possible self-imposed rules to help avoid having yet another predictable playthrough. Nuzlocks, for instance, restrict you to only your first encounter for each location, and monotype runs restrict you to a certain type. That said, even with some challenge runs, you can work your favorites in. Maybe you're doing a monotype run and you chose the type because you know it will allow you to use one of your favorite Pokemon. Even in Nuzlocke, you can choose whichever starter you want. I wanted to reject this notion of having a team that I like. I wanted to roll my eyes whenever I looked over my party. I wanted zero chance of one of my favorites ending up on my team. So, I decided to play Pokemon Fire Red using only Pokemon I hate. Oh, and let's make it a Nuzlocke for good measure. I did realize I could easily fake this by suddenly declaring my hatred for a Pokemon that could solo an upcoming gym or something. Like maybe at Viridian City I realized I really don't like Diglett. How convenient. So, I drafted my Pokemon prior to starting the save. Unfortunately for me, while I'm not Diglett's #1 fan, I don't hate the little guy. In fact, I don't dislike most of the Pokemon in this game. This leads us to the question of, how will I define Pokemon I hate? Simply put, vibes. We all have some Pokemon we do not like, whether due to their design, their overall weakness, or maybe a gut feeling. For instance, Mr. Mime will be on my list of hated Pokemon and thus be a viable party member. To my knowledge, he's actually a decent Pokemon, but I wouldn't know, because I've never used him before. Because look at him. I'll get more into why I hate specific Pokemon as they come up, but for now, let's start the run. You may soon notice that there are no starters on this list. I personally find all of the Kanto starters to be likable. However, I have to choose one, so I chose my least favorite of the trio, Squirtle. Look, I know a lot of you might not like that, but I have some serious nostalgia attached to the other two, and I had to choose one of them, so we're going with Squirtle. I'll only use Squirtle until I can catch the first truly hated Pokemon of the region, Rattata. I feel a little bad because this guy's pretty easy to hate on, but I dislike him nonetheless. First of all, he's a normal type. It's tough to be an exciting normal type. None of your stab moves are super effective against anyone, or can even hit ghost types, and you tend to be normal, bland, mundane. Personally, I was never a big fan of his design either. I do like his purple coloring, but I never liked the way his tail curled like that. It's like without the tail curl he would have looked too much like a real-life rodent, so they added the curl to make him a true pocket monster. Also, the teeth, while thematically correct, are not visually appealing to me. The cherry on top is the spelling of its name. I can never get it right on the first try. When I was writing this script even, I misspelled his name. I can never quite remember where the double T goes on my first try, and that reminds me of my incompetence, and thus, I hate him. So, I catch my first Pokemon of the run. I name her after the first rat that I can think of, and check her out. So she has the essentially useless runaway ability instead of guts, which would have been very helpful, and a calm nature, which is a nature that negatively impacts the attack stat. Cool. Well, now that I have my real starter, I can bench Squirtle and essentially put the first gym on hard mode. As someone who chose Charmander when playing this game as a kid, trust me when I say I understand how difficult Brock can be when he resists your attacks. I considered allowing myself to overlevel for Brock to make this run viable, but that felt a bit wrong. Instead, I decided that I would allow myself multiple Rattatas, quantity over quality. I was sure after the first gym I wouldn't need any duplicates, so I could enact a species clause once I advanced. So I picked up a rat from Route 1, Route 22, and Route 2. From Route 2 we have Mortimer, who is relaxed, which increases defense but decreases speed, and has the ability Guts. From Route 22 we have Jerry, a rat with a brave nature, which boosts attack though decreases speed, and, once again, Guts. With the rat pack assembled, it was time to take on the first gym. May the best rat live. Going into this battle, I knew with the terrible type matchup I had and Geodude's presumably decent defense stat, I'd have to lower his defense by at least 3 or 4 stages. This became a war of attrition, with Splinter using a Tail Whip and Geodude using Defense Curl to cancel it out. I've sped up the footage here because it's really not entertaining to see him go back and forth. Eventually, though, I do get some momentum when Geodude starts using Tackle. He does exactly 7 damage with each hit, allowing Splinter to potentially tank 4 non-critical hit tackles. Geodude and Splinter go back to trading Tail Whips and Defense Curls for a little bit. Once I got Geodude's defense stat lowered by 4 stages, and my rat was starting to look a little weak, I decided to try to dish out some damage with Hyper Fang, which unfortunately missed, but it's okay. We go back and forth again on Geodude's defense stat until my rat is on her last leg. I decided to play it safe with the full accuracy quick attack to make some sort of progress on Geodude's HP. The damage is okay. Geodude uses Tackle again and takes out Splinter. Now it was time to send in Mortimer. I decided to take another chance on Hyper Fang, and it does the job. 1 Pokemon down, 1 to go. I had Mortimer right at the edge of the level cap, so I could have as much of an advantage going into this battle as possible, and right after Mortimer levels up, I realized that I forgot to put the game into set mode, but that's fine, I'll fix that afterwards, and Brock sends out Onix, and the real fight begins. I know Onix is not the best Pokemon in general, but I understand his defense stat is nothing to laugh at. So, Mortimer needs to get some Tail Whips in. After the first one, Onix uses Rock Tomb. It does significant damage and lowers my speed, which is tragic. This was the worst case scenario, but we still need to get that defense as low as possible. Luckily, Onix switched to using Tackle instead of the much more powerful Rock Tomb, which allowed Mortimer to start getting in some more Tail Whips. Mortimer keeps taking hits trying to soften up the Onix for Jerry, and eventually we get to a grand total of 4 defense drops before Mortimer inevitably faints. Now it's time for the pre-poisoned Guts plus Attack Nature Rat to blitz the Onix. Hyper Fang, his strongest move, does a little over half. Onix correctly uses Rock Tomb, A, doing a ton of damage, and B, lowering my speed. The next move would be for all the marbles. Quick Attack is fully accurate and ignores the speed drop. That said, it won't kill in one hit, so I'd be betting on Onix using Tackle or Bind. I realized Quick Attack might not even two-shot, and with the Poison Chip damage, even Onix's weakest attacks could put me into an even more dangerous position. I had to go for Hyper Fang, the move guaranteed to kill, if it hits. That's all assuming the game's AI doesn't choose Rock Tomb, by the way, which is an equivalent scenario for Onix. It would definitely kill, but it's not fully accurate. Onix ends up playing it safe with Tackle, and Hyper Fang lands. Jerry is the lone survivor of the Rat Pack. Entering Route 3 during this playthrough was the only time I've ever been excited to find a Spearow. Spearow always struck me as a worse version of Pidgey. At this point in most playthroughs, I would already have a normal flying type, so I didn't need another. To be fair, I don't actually know how their base stats compare. I will not look them up in hopes that I will be pleasantly surprised. Additionally, I arbitrarily have always disliked Spearow's design. This opinion is one of those that I simply haven't updated since childhood. The segmented coloring of its plumage didn't jive with prepubescent me. Nowadays I can appreciate birds with more distinct, abruptly different colors, but as a kid I found his head, body, and wings all being different somewhat odd. It's hard to describe, but I just didn't like this look as a child, and I've never cared enough to reconsider it as an adult. And I know I've probably seen Spearow's back spray before, but this truly felt like my first time seeing it. Something about it just felt a bit jarring. Maybe I'm being too harsh on Spearow. Again though, I'm much more of a Pidgey guy. That's simply the early root bird that I want. Spearow feels like the bird at home. This was my first Kanto Nuzlocke, and I had no idea how to manage experience, so I was trying my best to avoid trainers on the way to and through Mount Moon to get to Misty without exceeding the level cap. While I was in Mount Moon, I picked up a Zubat. Now, I have no beef with Zubat. Sure, encountering a million of them in caves and their terrible early game moveset is enough to make some people hate these guys, but I really don't mind. So I will not be using Zubat. However, Golbat's design alone is so unlikable. His OG sprite is worse, but this isn't much better. Part of the reason I dislike the design is the stark difference between evolutions. You go from a compact, arguably cute little bat to 90% mandibles. Plus he gets eyes, but not in a cool or stylistic way. I feel like they should have just either left this evolutionary line blind or gone with cooler eyes. That said, Crobat's cool. Plus you can't evolve it until you get the national dex anyway in this game, so this will remain a Golbat. And for now, this will actually remain an unusable Zubat due to Misty's level cap being 21, and Zubat evolving at level 22. Upon exiting the mountain, I went to the move tutors. I decided a high base power normal type attack could serve my team well since both my current Pokemon would get stabbed when using it. I went for Mega Punch, the more reliable of the two moves available. Then I learned that neither of my Pokemon could punch, which makes sense anatomically. Out of desperation, I went to the Mega Kick tutor. Rats and birds have feet, don't they? Well, shit. On a more optimistic note, with the new level cap comes the first evolution of the run. Jerry evolved into Raticate, getting a substantial boost to his base stats. Additionally, we gain access to Scary Face for some potential speed control. That said, I did not know prior to this that Scary Face was not 100% accurate, which makes me a little apprehensive, but I'm sure it'll be fine. But wait, there's more. Bird at Home also gets to evolve. The base stat increase feels very reassuring. Along the way, she also learned Pursuit. Prior to this, I was considering using the Thief TM to give one of my evolved Pokemon a super effective move against Starmie. Now, I didn't need to weigh that decision. I guess the Spearow line has its perks. I almost forgot that I do get a new encounter here too. I never liked Ekans, primarily because I wanted to like Ekans. I honestly don't even mind the silly naming convention that people always joke about. I always felt like a venomous snake should have been a speedy, hard-hitting Pokemon. Whenever I briefly experimented with it in the past, it always seemed to be held back by disappointing stats and a poor learn set. Now it's time for Nag, shout out Riki Tiki Tevi, to prove me wrong. Of note, Nag has Intimidate, which could be really handy going forward. Also, Ekans does learn Bite, a super effective move against Misty's Starmie, but it doesn't evolve until after Misty's gym. So while Bite might be good in theory, I'm not confident our snake has the stats to deliver. While preparing for the fight, a lot of people online mentioned grabbing the Person Berry on Route 4 to help avoid the potential confusion from Water Pulse. I, however, heard this advice too late as I had already hopped off the ledge that I'm assuming the berry is behind. My plan going in was to use my strongest Pokemon, Bird at Home, to clear Misty's Staryu and then spam Pursuit on Starmie. As a backup, we have Jerry with Hyper Fang for damage, and Quick Attack to negate Starmie's absurd speed. I begin with Peck. Not the strongest move in the world, but with Stab and the attack base stat of an evolved bird, it does a perfect amount of damage. Staryu spares us from any damage by using Harden, and we take it out. Once again, I had a Pokemon at the edge of the level cap to really give myself as much of an advantage as I could. Bird at Home levels up to level 22, gets some increased stats, and we're on to the Beast. It's time to see what Pursuit can do. Starmie, unsurprisingly, outspeeds our bird and does a bit more damage than I had envisioned, and the bird's confused. Even after breaking through confusion, the super effective Pursuit was wildly disappointing. I immediately panicked. My options were to stay in or swap out. If I stay in, should I double down on chipping away at Starmie's health with Pursuit, or do I lower its defense, accepting the fact that Bird at Home isn't going to survive? All of that is assuming she doesn't hurt herself in confusion. I could switch out to remove the confusion. If I switch, do I swap to Jerry, hoping he can tank a Water Pulse, not get confused, and land a Hyper Fang to hopefully finish the battle? Raticate seems too valuable to potentially sacrifice at this point. I decide to stay in with Fearow, knowing it would not live, and go for a Leer to help secure a victory for the surviving party members. I really wish I had that Person Berry. I send in Jerry, hoping that 1, Starmie doesn't one-shot him, and 2, he won't miss a Hyper Fang. He lives through a Water Pulse, hits the Hyper Fang, but it doesn't quite finish the job. At least he's not confused. I go for the Quick Attack, forgetting Misty uses potions. The Quick Attack does pretty okay damage. Another Water Pulse from Starmie puts Jerry on his last leg. He lands another Hyper Fang though, again falling short of a KO. At this point, I didn't know if Misty had another potion, if she would use it, or if a Quick Attack could just kill from this range. What I did know is that I had to try it. And the Quick Attack kills. I know a lot of times when people do Nuzlocke, they say, oh, this death hurt, this death really hit hard or something, but I was actually surprised how quickly I developed an attachment to this ugly bird. Maybe it was because it was my first non-Rattata Pokemon. Maybe. Additionally, it probably hit hard because, well, look at this team. It's worth noting that my list of hated Pokemon in this game only includes 8 evolutionary lines, so any death is really gonna hurt. Anyway, with a new level cap and a Golbat, it's on to the bridge rival fight. At the last minute, I decided to lead with Dark Knight instead of Jerry, as his stats were marginally better, and bite flinches sounded promising. Plus, since he's a flying type, Pidgeotto won't be able to use Sand Attack to lower... Oh, okay. Noting that Sand Attack ignores Flying's ground immunity, I continue with Bite to take out the Pidgeotto. The rival sends out Abra, who cannot damage anything, so I swap out to remove the accuracy drops from Sand Attack. I swap Dark Knight back in, Abra tries to teleport, and we one-shot with Wing Attack. After Abra, we see a Rattata, and we also see our first Bite Flinch. It's somewhat negated by a Quick Attack, but the Quick Attack damage is minimal, so we take the rat off the field with minimal consequences. Finally, Bulbasaur comes out. This grass type is no match for a super effective Wing Attack. And just like that, the fight's over. That was the first major fight that I actually felt confident during. It was a nice change of pace. The Nugget Bridge trainers were a breeze, and Nag got a chance to shine in the rocket fight. He simply out-snaked the other snake, likely in part due to the level difference and a critical hit, but you know. Then came the Grunt's Zubat. Any member of the team could have faced it, but I kept Nag in. He landed a Glare. It was cool, but admittedly possibly not necessary. Zubat's Leech Life then did exactly 1 point of damage, and Bites and Paralysis took care of the rest of the fight. The sweep was so righteous that Nag evolved into Arbok. As for new encounters, Route 24 and 25 did not have anything I needed. Yet. The next level cap was 24. Having only 3 Pokemon, the real challenge of Route 25 was managing experience by dodging trainers and choosing the right mandatory trainers. I got through with my team rather close to the cap. All I needed to do was fight one more rocket and we'd get another encounter to offload experience onto. With that out of the way, it was time for a new encounter on Route 5. Meowth. Why do I dislike Meowth? Simply put, the vibe is off. I was raised having cats as pets, so I'm inclined to like cats. For some reason, and I don't know if this is only me, but Pokemon has consistently failed to accurately capture the vibe of cats. I want to like cat Pokemon because I like cats in reality. However, I've never gotten attached to any cat Pokemon across the generations of games. Who didn't want to catch a cat or a dog Pokemon as a kid? Name them after your household pet, and conquer the region with them by your side. Pokemon cats have never felt similar in personality to my own pets though, so it never felt right. The very first disappointing cat Pokemon was Meowth. Welcome to the team, Hairball. Eventually we make it to Viridian City without anyone exceeding Surge's level cap. All we need to do is get on the SSN, beat our rival, and get cut. Should be easy, right? I decided to lead with Jerry to get Pidgeotto off the field as soon as possible. He lands a Hyper Fang, doesn't quite kill, and Pidgeotto does get a Sand Attack off before fainting. My rival then decides to try to beat me with his own rat. That Sand Attack immediately pays off for him as Jerry misses Hyper Fang. The Raticate then uses Tail Whip, dropping my defense. With both an accuracy and a defense drop, I decided it was time to switch out. I bring in Nag, who I trust to tank a Hyper Fang, plus the Intimidate could possibly really help. Instead of Hyper Fang, the Raticate goes with Tail Whip again, lowering Nag's defense, which is essentially negated by the Intimidate. Nag then gets a critical hit, Bite, plus the flinch. After that amazing luck, he finishes the Raticate. Next up is Kadabra. There is no way I'm staying in with a poison type, so I switched back to Jerry. Kadabra wastes a turn with Disable, and my trusty Raticate lands the Hyper Fang and one-shots him. Jerry gets a level up, and I'm feeling pretty hyped, so we stay in for the Venusaur. Hyper Fang does its usual impressive damage, but Ivysaur puts Jerry to sleep. I considered switching, but I figured we could take a few Vine Whips while we try to wake up. Jerry stays asleep, Ivysaur lands a Vine Whip, and my luck continues with an early wake up into a finishing Quick Attack. Just like that, we get the HM for cut. It was a little intimidating to go up against Surge without a ground type. I figured I would need speed and good special defense to get through this fight. At the time, our fastest team member was Hairball, but her defenses were paper thin. Our next fastest were Dark Knight and Jerry. There was no chance I was willingly bringing out my flying type in the electric gym, so Golbat is off the table. Jerry's special defense was pretty good, but I do know that Surge's Raichu has Body Slam, so we need physical defense as well. That left Nag, who appeared to be our most well-rounded Pokemon for this gym. Additionally, Nag is one of the party members who can learn Dig, a high-risk, high-reward move in this gym. Ground is super effective against electric, so clearly it has value. However, it does take 2 turns to execute. That gives Pikachu and Raichu opportunities to set up double teams. Planning for this fight made me really wish I hated Diglett. Surge leads with Voltorb, I lead with Nag, and we start biting. The first half of this fight features some incredible luck. Look at that flinch. We go for another bite and another flinch. Surge then wastes his potion on Voltorb, so he has one less potion for Raichu later on. I'm sure this good luck will continue for the remainder of the fight. We go for a few more bites, Voltorb does get a shockwave off, but it's not that much damage, and we take him out. Once Voltorb went down, Surge brought out Pikachu. We bite again, and we get another flinch. This luck will never run out. Pikachu doesn't even go for the quick attack, so we're able to take him out, and we're on to Raichu with almost full HP and a mid-battle level up. I really couldn't ask for a better setup. However, Raichu is faster than Nag, so we never even get a chance at hitting this thing with full accuracy, because it immediately uses Double Team. We go for Bite, which Nag misses, but we can try again. A single Double Team isn't that bad. Okay, 2 Double Teams. But hey, we land the Bite, and I really thought it would do more damage. Oh, and of course Raichu's static ability paralyzes Nag, burning our 1 Cherry Berry. With 2 double teams set up, I try to rebalance the fight by paralyzing Raichu with Glare. Instead, he paralyzes Nag with Thunder Wave, and then Glare misses. I try again for the Glare, but this guy sets up a 3rd double team, so, as you may expect, the Glare misses. I can't give up though. He, of course, sets up another double team. I try for Glare again, and again it doesn't land. We do the dance again. He sets up a 5th double team as I pray for Glare to somehow land. It doesn't, on account of the 5 double teams. As I click Glare once again, Raichu decides to start dishing out damage with Shockwave. It does a reasonable amount of damage, and guess what? Glare misses. As he's using Shockwave again, I'm thinking, hey, maybe this Glare will cut through the evasion boosts. Well, we'll never know because that paralysis finally kicked in. Nag was in the red and paralyzed. I saw his fate. I figured maybe Raichu would go for another double team, and I would have one more opportunity to get a status effect on this mouse for the sake of the remaining team. Raichu kept his foot on the gas though, and struck down my Cobra. Jerry came in against an almost maximum evasion boost in Raichu with almost full HP. I go for speed control, but Raichu paralyzes Jerry with Thunder Wave. Being paralyzed is obviously a disadvantage, but it does activate Guts. If I can hit 1 Hyper Fang, this should all be over. The Scary Face hit, but it wouldn't do any good. We need to kill this thing. He hits us with a critical hit Shockwave, which definitely increased my blood pressure, and the Hyper Fang missed. Our Citrus Berry puts Jerry back into a safer HP range, letting us take another chance on the already not fully accurate Hyper Fang. Jerry takes a Shockwave, not a crit this time, and misses again. It's do or die. Jerry takes another Shockwave, hangs on with 4 HP, and hits the Hyper Fang to win the battle. I let out the breath I didn't know I was holding. This victory doesn't feel good. Nag was a surprisingly good Pokemon. The fast bites helped us flinch through a lot of the trainers on our way to this gym. He was our best defensive Pokemon too. Plus, I invested the Dig TM on Nag and didn't have the courage to use it. I lay my snake to rest and move on. I made my way through Rock Tunnel all the way to Celadon without any casualties. I was ready to face Erica, relying solely on Dark Knight. With a Lumberry from Route 8, and solid speed and attack, and stab flying move, what more could I ask for? It also doesn't hurt that Hairball evolved. The battle begins with Victory Bell. Dark Knight easily outspeeds and hits a super effective wing attack. Victory Bell survives and uses Stun Spore. Dark Knight gets paralyzed, but no worries, that's what the Lumberry is for, right? However, then Erica heals before I can finish the Victory Bell. Not a huge problem. Another wing attack brings it down to low health again. Now, I struggle to explain what I did next. I guess I thought she might heal again, so I wouldn't need to use my strongest move. I guess I was conserving PP on the move with 35 PP. Maybe at this HP, a weaker move would kill anyway. Look, I know I simply should have kept pressing A, but I didn't. I clicked Bite. It didn't kill, and Victory Bell was able to paralyze Dark Knight again. Now, for the rest of the fight, my sweeper was going to be slower than the opponent. Cool stuff. Since I was now slower, Victory Bell was able to get in some chip damage before going down. Next out was Tangela. Thanks to the paralysis, she's able to set up Ingrain before I even hit her. I mean, it ultimately doesn't matter because look at that wing attack damage, but still. It was demoralizing that Tangela was even able to get a shot in after wasting a turn on Ingrain. It didn't do a lot of damage, but my ego was taking hits here too. But whatever. Vileplume is up next. She decides to throw acid in my bat's face, but wing attack clearly 2 shots here. And Dark Knight resists acid, so this isn't a disaster. I take out the Vileplume with one last wing attack, and we were done. It definitely felt like a tarnished victory. This was supposed to be the easy gym, and I chose a bad time to deviate from simply spamming the best move. Also, I might not have even needed to use the Lumberry. Anyway, Dark Knight secured our 4th badge with no casualties. Good news and bad news. The good news is that the level cap for the next gym is 43. The bad news is that the level cap for the gym after that is 43. Plus, I know that there will be a lot of trainer battles between now and the next gym, so we can't go too crazy with leveling. I figured 31 was a good place to have everyone. Additionally, it was time for a special encounter. Fuck. You see, I don't hate Abra. However, the Pokemon I possibly hate the most is the one and only Mr. Mime. I hate Mr. Mime. His design sucks. His vibe is terrifying. It's a species of creature with Mr. in its name. The fact that he looks so human without being human is wildly unnerving. Look at him. Look at him. How is this even a Pokemon? To be fair, like I said before, I've heard that Mr. Mime, from a performance perspective, is not bad. However, I wouldn't know because I've never used the Mr. Mime because I find him despicable. But I guess I'll find out now. Immediately, the Mime shows promise by being perfectly suited to destroy the grunts in the rocket hideout. They're almost all weak to his psychic or grass move, or they simply don't have sufficient special defense. It was very nice to sweep through the hideout, but I paused before Giovanni. Magical Leaf could likely one-shot his Onix and Rhyhorn, but his Kangaskhan would be a challenge. I stepped away and took a lot of time trying to think up some way Mr. Mime could help here. Obviously, I'd lead with him to get Onix out of the way. If Giovanni then sent out Rhyhorn, Mr. Mime would probably be able to easily defeat that as well, so I wasn't concerned. But eventually, that Kangaskhan would be out. I figured Mr. Mime could survive the fake out, then use Encore to lock it into the then ineffective move. In Gen 3, Encore is only guaranteed to last for 2 turns. It can last longer, but I wouldn't feel comfortable betting on that. With 2 turns of Encore, I could use Mr. Mime to set up Reflect, then switch, and then pray the Encore continues? I was also stuck on who to switch into. Then I understood that Kangaskhan has Bite, and will likely go for the one-shot with Bite as opposed to Fake Out. Mr. Mime would be screwed. I'd have to switch him out without setting up the Encore or Reflect, and I wasn't sure how well any of my Pokemon could switch into this thing. After reviewing my team a bit more, I realized something. This whole time, I was used to my limited team being mainly physical attackers. Mr. Mime was refreshing as a special attacker, but I've been overlooking one Pokemon for a bit now. We lead with Hairball. Hairball's special attack is actually decent, at least relative to her attack. Simply based on appearances, I've always assumed Persian was another physical attacker, but it's actually a mixed attacker. I still had the Water Pulse TM from Misty, too. Its base power isn't off the charts by any means, but it's decent. With Onix's bad typing and poor special defense, Hairball one-shots it, and I don't think the crit even mattered. Rhyhorn? Same story. Now I didn't have to waste a turn switching out Mr. Mime on Kangaskhan. I could immediately start lowering its attack with Growls. Suddenly this felt possible. So, Hairball starts with a growl. Kangaskhan keeps pace with Tail Whip, balancing out the stat debuffs. She goes for a Mega Punch and thankfully misses. With effectively only one attack debuff thanks to the Tail Whip, who knows what kind of damage that could have done. We go back to trading stat debuffs. I, however, can eventually switch and reset Hairball's stat debuffs. Giovanni doesn't have that luxury. Eventually, Kangaskhan goes for Bite, doing modest damage. I stay the course and get a total of 6 growls. Tired of this, Kangaskhan actually lands a Mega Punch. I do not like that damage. I bring in a Pokemon who doesn't have defense drops to eat a hit. Jerry takes the bite and I test out how much damage his strongest move does. Not a lot for a strongest move. Clearly I need to take some inspiration from my opponent and start using Tail Whip. We trade Tail Whips for a bit back and forth. I feel safe knowing her attack is as low as it can get. However, Mega Punch still does quite a bit of damage to Jerry. Time to once again bring out a Pokemon without debuffs, only to immediately take a Tail Whip, but it's fine. With the black glasses equipped, 2 defense debuffs, and a chance to flinch, I feel confident clicking Bite. The damage is not what I hoped for, and she definitely did not flinch, so I consider swapping out, uncomfortable with Hairball's HP. I weigh my options and decide my best choice is to go for some more damage and pray for a flinch. We eke out a little bit more damage, she doesn't flinch, and Hairball's left barely hanging on. Definitely time to switch into Dark Knight. He immediately gets his defense lowered, but it should be fine with Kangaskhan's debuffed attack. I choose Confuse Ray, hoping some RNG will help me clinch victory. So far, not paying dividends. The growls are definitely coming in handy though. I again decide to go for flinch strats with Bite, but it doesn't pan out. At least there's a low chance of her breaking through confusion and landing a Mega Punch. Okay, cool. Imperfect luck aside, from this HP, Wing Attack should kill, and one less Kangaskhan. Giovanni is defeated. For now. The next boss battle is our rival in Pokemon Tower. Using our hard-earned Shockwave TM from Surge, I was able to give Mr. Mime a pretty decent Electric-type move. With it, our Mr. Mime can one-shot Pidgeotto. Next up, our rival sends out Gyarados, and if Shockwave can one-shot the Pidgeotto, Shockwave can definitely one-shot Gyarados. So we let it rip, and it works. Next we have to deal with the Growlithe, who is very low level and unevolved, but still potentially scary with a bite, so I decided to switch out to Hairball. He hits us with Ember, which is no concern, and that Water Pulse gets more value by one-shotting Growlithe. Next we have Kadabra, who is weak to Dark-type moves, so, you know, it's time to bite. And that's 2 crits in a row from Hairball, so I'm riding high at this point. With Kadabra down, finally we have Ivysaur. I figure we can stay in and go for the bite flinch, but that doesn't happen. He ends up putting Hairball to sleep with Sleep Powder, which isn't a huge issue, and I fish for an early wake up, but he starts using Razor Leaf. The damage isn't terrible, but it is a little worrisome when I don't know exactly when Hairball is going to be able to wake up and fend for herself. It looks like the early wake up won't happen, and Razor Leaf is a high crit chance move, so I go for the safe route with Dark Knight, who can resist the incoming Razor Leaf thanks to being a flying type. After taking barely any damage on the switch, Dark Knight finishes the battle with a single wing attack. This team's actually shaping up to do pretty well. After using Violence to calm the Ghost of Marowak and sweeping through the Rocket Grunts with Mr. Mime and Hairball, we save Mr. Fuji and get the Pokeflute. This allows us to finally face Snorlax. And run. I have no beef with you, Snorlax. Please don't kill my Pokemon. Finally, I was entering Fuchsia City. Once I got the good rod, my final encounters opened up to me. First, Goldeen. Goldeen is a water type among plenty of other interesting water types. There were always better water types available, so I never used Goldeen. Additionally, following a trend in this video, I always had a negative gut feeling about the design. Maybe it was the lips. Maybe it was how Seaking always looked so vacuous. Maybe it reminded me of the first dead fish I ever witnessed get flushed. Who knows? Point is, I don't like these fish. Lastly, we caught a Poliwag. How could I hate Poliwag? Look at this adorable little guy. That's the thing. I don't hate Poliwag. After evolving the Poliwag into Poliwhirl and trekking back to Cerulean City, I trade away this perfectly fine Pokemon for a monstrosity. The design of this creature is horrible. It has the same terrible flaw that Mr. Mime has, being too human, while also having prominent breasts. Combined with its suggestive learn set, the whole vibe of this thing reeks. On top of that, its appearance can be seen as racist. And on a personal note, during my first ever playthrough of Fire Red as a kid, Lorelei's Jinx would terrorize my team with unceasing sweet kisses. She'd put my Pokemon to sleep, I'd play the Poké Flute, take some damage, then get put back to sleep over and over and over. To me, this thing is Mr. Mime, but somehow worse. But hey, I finally have a full team. I was about to challenge Koga, and I had a perfect plan. Mr. Mime would use Psybeam to wipe all the poison types. If Muck used Minimize, I could fall back on Shockwave. Easy. However, I remembered that the level cap doesn't increase between Koga and Sabrina. There was a good chance I'd accidentally overlevel Mr. Mime on Koga. Then I couldn't use him for Sabrina. I didn't have a solid plan for Sabrina yet, but I could imagine needing Mr. Mime's special defense stat, so I didn't want to risk that. Alternatively, I could fight Koga while being very underleveled to give myself a large enough experience point margin to get through Koga and Silphco, and arrive at Sabrina right at level 43. Facing a gym leader very underleveled though was not appealing. So, I decided to back out of Koga's gym, stay in the mid to high 30s, and take on Silphco. The few grunts I ran into were no problem, but the rival battle was a different story. He starts out with his now fully evolved Pidgeot, and I lead with Mr. Mime. I go for the obvious choice of Shockwave. It doesn't end up doing as much damage as I wanted, but it's fine. The Pidgeot hits back with a pretty strong wing attack, taking us down to almost half health. It shouldn't be a huge problem though, because Shockwave looks like it two-shots, so... Oh. Okay, so Mr. Mime will have less HP going forward, but that's fine, because he's gonna one-shot Gyarados, and then... I forgot about Quick Attack. Here's the uncut footage of me sitting in shock at this catastrophe. Still in a bit of a daze, I throw out Dark Knight to finish off this evil bird with a bite. It works, and we can carry on. The rival sends out Alakazam. I consider trying to one-shot it with Bite, but I really don't feel comfortable keeping in my poison type against an Alakazam of all things, especially after already making one stupid mistake. I switch in Jinx, thinking that her solid special defense will be able to tank whatever Alakazam throws our way. Instead of directly attacking, he sets up a Future Sight, which is always scary. Playing it as safe as possible, I click Lovely Kiss to put the Alakazam to sleep. Time to start punching this nerd. The first Ice Punch ends up doing a ton of damage. While he's snoozing, Jinx takes the Future Sight attack, which does a fair chunk of damage. Zan continues to snooze, and Jinx Ice Punches one more time to finish him. Alright, that's one major threat taken care of with no more losses. But now we have to deal with Gyarados. To be honest, I had no plan for Gyarados other than one-shotting him with Shockwave, and we obviously can't do that anymore. Since Jinx has paper-thin physical defense, I decide to switch to Flush. I didn't know this, but apparently Seeking is really bulky, so that's actually coming in handy. Unfortunately, my fish is outsped by the bigger fish and gets her defense dropped before she even gets to use Horn Attack. The attack does what I would describe as insufficient damage, so we need to drop his defense a bit. But not before Gyarados lowers Flush's defense even further. We get our Tail Whip in, and then Gyarados uses Dragon Rage, which, funnily enough, does not capitalize on the stat debuffs, but whatever. After that last Tail Whip, I'm a little too scared to keep Flush in with her current defense drops. So I swap in Dark Knight, who tanks another Dragon Rage. And I decide to pray for Bite Flinches. Not only do we not get the flinch, but the damage output is terrible. After he bites back, I decide to go for Confuse Ray. Some confusion self-hits would really help turn the tides in my favor right now. Instead, we see another Dragon Rage, putting my bat into the red. It was time to switch into Hairball. The rival's Gyarados immediately snaps out of confusion, which is super chill, and bites my cat. The damage isn't terrible, but I go for Growl to play it safe. He bites Hairball again, and I realize it's time to start dishing out some bites myself. The damage is pathetic, but he flinches. I roll the dice for another flinch, and get it. How about a third flinch? We get a third flinch. No way we get a fourth, right? Okay, that's fair. That's fair. One more bite, and we take him out. Next up is Growlithe. That's actually quite nice, as I'm sure Water Pulse will one-shot, right? Not quite, but thankfully the Growlithe gets confused. It could certainly kill Hairball right now, I'm sure, but the insane luck continues, and it hits itself in confusion. We then get him off the field, and we have one more opponent, Venusaur. I'm not going to push Hairball's luck any further, so I swap in Jerry to see what kind of headway I can make. Before I can even begin to consider using Hyper Fang, Venusaur shows that he can easily kill my rat. I need this thing dead now. I swapped to Jinx to hopefully make quick work of him with Ice Punch. On the switch in, she takes a Razor Leaf, and it hurts, but it leaves some wiggle room. I think about Sweet Kiss, but I would never forgive myself if it missed, so I go all out with Ice Punch. It falls short of expectations, and my rival steals my idea of using a sleep move. At this point, I'm not confident in switching anyone into a Razor Leaf, so I have to have faith in Jinx surviving one more Razor Leaf and maybe waking up early the next turn. Let's see how that goes. Oh, cool. Super cool. I use the Bat Signal to summon the Dark Knight, and having a clean switch, he finishes the fight with Wing Attack, and we secure a hollow victory. The run is dead in the water now. I got careless and forgot about Quick Attack. Additionally, I'm sure that if Mr. Mime was just one level higher, Shockwave would have two-shot the Pidgeot and we could have avoided this whole thing. It would have prevented the whole subsequent scrambling and loss of Jinx too. Like I said before, my only plan for Koga was to sweep with Mr. Mime, so that's out the window. He also would have been really valuable for Sabrina. It's funny, earlier that day at work I was daydreaming about how this run could possibly make it to the Elite Four. Now all that seems impossible. But we won't go down without a fight. I leveled all my Pokemon to level 41 for Giovanni, knowing this could be the team's final battle. I lead with Dark Knight against his Nidorino. Knowing I can't one-shot this thing, I go for a Bite Flinch instead. That doesn't pan out, but Fury Attack shouldn't be a problem as long as it doesn't hit too much. 3 is fine. Time to deal some actual damage with Wing Attack. Nidorino then uses Poison Sting, which does minimal damage and can't actually poison my bat, so that's perfect. Dark Knight then finishes Nidorino with a Wing Attack. Giovanni then sends out his next Pokemon, Rhyhorn. Its Rock Blast would be pretty scary here, but Erica gave us the Giga Drain TM, allowing Dark Knight to one-shot it and recover to 100% HP. All things considered, I was in a pretty good spot. With half of his team done, Giovanni sends in his dreaded Kangaskhan. While Dark Knight is in, I figure I could benefit from Confuse Ray, but Kangaskhan uses Fake Out. But Giovanni is too stupid to know about Inner Focus. With a successfully confused enemy, I go for maximum damage output with Wing Attack. Yes, that is maximum damage output here. Kangaskhan manages to land a Mega Punch through the confusion, proccing my Oranberry. It's clearly time to switch. Since this beast hasn't been debuffed yet, I choose to put in our tank, Flush. Kangaskhan is confused, but manages to use Rage for a bit of damage on my big fish. There's nothing to do but start stacking Tail Whips. After the first one, Kangaskhan snaps out of Confusion. Once again, no value from Confusion. She hits a Mega Punch that does a little more damage than I anticipated. Regardless, I stick to the plan of softening her defense stat. She then goes for the much weaker but fully accurate Rage. We set up a third Tail Whip, and Kangaskhan goes for Mega Punch, and thankfully misses. This allows us to set up a fourth Tail Whip. Our opponent sticks to choosing Rage, dealing minimal damage, and we get a fifth Tail Whip off. And, unfortunately, Flush gets flushed. Now it's time for Deja Vu. I bring out Kangaskhan's old nemesis, Hairball. Yes, it is once again time to growl as much as possible. Hairball shrugs off a Rage and sets up a second attack debuff. And then, after another, slightly weaker Rage, she growls again. After this one though, Kangaskhan uses Tail Whip, effectively negating one Growl for now. Not a big deal. We then get a fourth Growl in before our opponent's Kangaskhan decides to use Mega Punch, which still deals a good amount of damage despite all the Growls. Time for a fifth Growl, and our opponent answers with a Tail Whip. To really seal the deal, we get a 6th attack debuff on Kangaskhan, and she uses Tail Whip again. After all of Flush's Tail Whips, surely a Black Glasses boosted bite will do some good damage. Incorrect, but the flinch is valuable. Let's see if we can keep the flinch luck going while chipping away at Kangaskhan. No? Okay. Now in the red, it is time to switch out. I switch into my trusty old rat Jerry, who is immediately greeted with a defense debuff from Tail Whip. To shift things in my favor, I go with Thunder Wave. As with the confusion before, Kangaskhan truly does not care and uses Mega Punch anyway. Thanks to the Growls, it doesn't hurt too much. At this HP, I wasn't entirely sure if Hyper Fang would kill, but it does the trick. Apparently we didn't need that paralysis after all. Well, that's fine. I'm sure Jerry won't need the 20 HP he lost using Thunder Wave. Lastly, we face Nidoqueen. I count on Jerry, my loyal rat who's been clutching up since the first gym, to survive one double kick in order to use Super Fang to cut Nidoqueen's HP in half. He doesn't. From full health, he could have hung on by a thread. If I went for the kill immediately on Kangaskhan, Jerry might have been able to walk away from this fight. With no time to mourn, Dark Knight comes out to deliver some justice. I start by seeing if Giga Drain would be viable at all, but the minor recovery simply is not worth it. The Queen uses Tail Whip in return. It's time to go all out. Dark Knight's wing attack falls short of the mark, and Nidoqueen uses Body Slam. Even after the defense drop, Dark Knight manages to hang on. One more wing attack, and the Queen is dead. I did not celebrate after this win. If I felt my fate was sealed after the rival battle, I felt it even more now. I lost my tankiest Pokemon, and I was just starting to grow fond of that silly fish. As for Jerry, not only was he the oldest member of the team, but his death was avoidable. After seeing how little damage Bite did to Kangaskhan even after the Tail Whips, I lost some confidence. Additionally, Hyper Fang doesn't have 100% accuracy. Maybe he would have missed and taken the damage anyway. I don't know, it felt like a terrible misplay in hindsight. I walked into Koga's gym with what felt like a death sentence. I challenged him with my final 2 Pokemon. I decided to level my team to the cap because, once again, this felt like it very much could be the final battle of the run. Koga sends out his Coughing, and I lead with Hairball, hoping to capitalize on Coughing's poor special defense. It works pretty well, and the Coughing gets confused. For once, the confusion actually pays off, preventing Coughing from potentially using Self-Destruct. One more Water Pulse, and that's one Pokemon down. Hairball gets a level up, and we move on to Muck. Now, I know this Muck can be a nuisance with its evasion boosts. I test out Bite to see if Hairball versus Muck is a viable matchup. The damage is pretty mediocre, and Muck immediately starts using Minimize. I cut my losses and switch to Dark Knight, who I just taught Aerial Ace for this very scenario. Muck sets up with Acid Armor, covering for his somewhat poor defense. Dark Knight's Aerial Ace doesn't do much damage, but it does negate the evasion boost. I realize Muck's Sludge barely hurts Dark Knight, and I continue with Aerial Ace. He gets a crit and takes Muck out of the equation. Suddenly I feel less pessimistic. After a mid-battle level up, we have one more Coughing to face. I decide to see how much Aerial Ace can do despite his good physical defense. It brings Coughing down to half health, and all he can do is feebly use Sludge. Just like that, we're done with the Coughings, and we're on to Koga's Ace. A level 43 Wheezing. Realizing I could actually win, I start to play it safe and set up Confusion. Surely it'll help this time, right? The Wheezing is confused, but it manages to use Sludge anyway. Dark Knight resists it well and fires back with Aerial Ace. But first, Koga uses his full heal, negating the Confuse Ray setup. Aerial Ace does decent damage though, so it still feels possible. Another one brings Wheezing to below half health. He continues to use Sludge, weakening Dark Knight little by little. We exchange another Aerial Ace for another Sludge, and I see the kill. I go for it, but Koga heals, which I should have seen coming. Now that our HP bars aren't so similar, I find it smart to switch into Hairball. She does not tank the Sludges nearly as well as Dark Knight. Prior to this fight, I purchased a TM for Hyper Beam. I taught it to Hairball as a Hail Mary of sorts. It was time to debut it. And she misses the Hyper Beam. Weezing uses Sludge, and she just barely hangs on. Okay, one last shot. Hairball uses Hyper Beam. And it kills! Somehow Hairball snagged victory from the jaws of defeat. Well, at least for now. Next is Sabrina. Technically, my team is overleveled, but it probably won't make a difference, so let's have one final battle. Sabrina sends out her Kadabra, and I send out Hairball. I find this to be the obvious choice because I do not want to bring out my poison type here if I do not have to. The clear choice is to use Bite. It does tremendous damage, but doesn't quite kill. Kadabra sets up Reflect, and before I can knock him out with Bite, Sabrina heals. It's not a problem though, because Bite brings Kadabra back down to similar HP. Despite Reflect. I didn't have time to question it, so I simply finish him off with another Bite. Sabrina sends out Mr. Mime, reminding me of my own tragic past, and Hairball's Bite puts him at half health. Mr. Mime then sets up a Calm Mind, which is a little scary. It's no problem though, because Bite takes him out, and... wait. Finally, the gears started to turn in my head. Bite's damage was unaffected by Reflect, but it was lowered by Calm Mind, and this is a Gen 3 game. Guys, for the entire playthrough up until this point, I had totally forgotten that Dark type is special in Gen 3. Looking back at earlier fights, this would have been a game changer. Think of the turns that I sacrificed to set up defense drops, and then I used Bite afterwards. Maybe this run would still be viable if I actually used Bite correctly. I've clearly been playing too much Gen 4 and 5 recently, but no time for excuses. Anyway, deeply ashamed, I try for Bite again, as it still did decent damage, and it was still Hairball's best move in this situation. After Sabrina's Hyper Potion, Mr. Mime survives the Bite. I go for another, it does pretty good damage, but Mr. Mime's Calm Mind boosted Psybeam does quite a number. Wounded almost as badly as my Pride, Hairball knocks out Mr. Mime. As Sabrina sends out her Bug, I look at Hairball's HP bar and I think, it's time to switch in my Flying type. Dark Knight actually takes a Psybeam rather well, but he does get confused, which I prepared for by equipping a Persim Berry to cure it, and then he uses Aerial Ace. This manages to take down the Venomoth in one hit. But it's not over yet. Sabrina sends out her ace, Alakazam. I immediately start comparing my two Pokemon. Which of them has the best chance to both withstand Alakazam's attacks and take him down as quickly as possible? With Hairball being so low on health, the choice doesn't feel obvious. I decide to keep Dark Knight in and go for Aerial Ace. Alakazam outspeeds, but he sets up Future Sight instead of attacking immediately. Aerial Ace doesn't do quite enough damage, so I have to pray Dark Knight can withstand a single hit and finish the job. Dark Knight's dead. Now it was my last Pokemon versus her last Pokemon. I was struggling to decide between Bite, which with my recently remembered knowledge may not cut through Alakazam's high special defense, or Hyper Beam, which will definitely kill but isn't fully accurate. I go with Bite and... it kills. Dark Knight's death is a huge blow. He was versatile with his varied moveset, solid attack, and decent bulk. Now, there was only one. My old friend from Route 5. Since the run was still going somehow, I had to take out Squirtle. Don't worry, I won't use him in battle, I just need someone with Surf and Strength to get through the Seafoam Islands. After spending a lot of time working through the Seafoam Islands and the Pokemon Mansion, I challenged Blaine with my one Pokemon. He leads with Growlithe, and I have Hairball use Water Pulse. With it being super effective, it does a really good amount of damage. Growlithe hangs on though to try to use Fire Blast, which thankfully misses. Before I can strike down his dog, Blaine heals Growlithe to full health with a Hyper Potion. Nothing a little Water Pulse can't fix. Plus, he gets confused. Which doesn't come into play, but I'm taking any morale boost I can at this point. Once Growlithe is off the field, Blaine brings out Ponyta. Once again, I go with Water Pulse, doing pretty good damage. Ponyta, however, does not miss his Fire Blast, and boy does it do a big chunk of damage. Feeling fearful of the Ponyta line for the very first time in my life, I have Hairball Water Pulse this pony away. The crit is not necessary, but I appreciate the hustle. Then comes Rapidash. Based on the damage exchanged between Ponyta and Hairball, I know two things. 1. Hairball cannot one-shot Rapidash with Water Pulse. 2. Rapidash can kill Hairball with Fire Blast. I could try to go for Hyper Beam to one-shot it, but again, the lack of full accuracy kind of scares me a little bit. And the Intimidate from Growlithe does lower my attack. I roll the dice and go for a Bite Flinch, and it doesn't happen. Blaine's Rapidash uses Fire Blast, and my run goes up in flames. Although the run was finally over, I felt good about the experience. I ended up getting really attached to most of these Pokemon, except for Jinx. And this was probably helped by the fact that it was a Nuzlocke, but I feel like even in a vanilla playthrough I would have gotten attached just having these guys in my party, playing their specific roles and each having their moment to shine. Plus, I realized that some of them were actually really solid in the earlier mid-game. Like Arbok. Arbok was like my best Pokemon at one point. I wish I kept more footage of the Route 25 trainers, because like Arbok was killing it on those. He just had the defense to deal with a lot of them, and the fact that he had a non-normal type move was really helpful against the, like the Geodudes and whatnot. Persian was surprisingly really good to me. Again, I didn't know that it had decent special attack, at least for early and mid-game stuff. Plus the speed was really good. It outsped Alakazam, that was great. Golbat was another surprise to me. Whenever I use or go up against a Crobat, for some reason I always know that its attack is good and its speed is good, and I just kind of assume that the other stats are a little lower to balance that out, and apparently that's not the case. At least with Golbat, it seems really well-rounded. Like, there were times that I didn't realize until I was reviewing the footage or kind of too late into a battle that Golbat's HP and defense stats were actually the most viable in certain scenarios. It was pretty cool. Rattata and Raticate, honestly, really good too. Well, I did notice that Jerry's bulk kind of fell off later in the run. He couldn't take as many hits. Having Hyper Fang super early in the game, that was pretty cool. That felt really powerful. To be honest, I went into this run with very low expectations. I did not think I was going to beat the game at all, so I was just doing as best I could on each fight and having fun with it. And then I realized it was viable once I got Mr. Mime and Jinx, so that was kind of weird because then my expectations went totally the opposite, and I was picturing myself getting to the Elite Four, which is unfortunate because we didn't get to see any of that come through because, then they died, which then my expectations returned to pretty much 0 for the run. So it was a real emotional roller coaster going from having no hope to having arguably too much of it and then back down to no hope. It does kind of suck that I lost the run largely due to my own stupid mistakes. Like the quick attack thing with Mr. Mime, I was just playing too fast. The whole thing about forgetting that dark type attacks are all special attacks in this generation, that that was painful to realize as late into the run as I did. In the middle of that Sabrina fight, putting 2 and 2 together, looking back, it's almost painful because there was at least 1 or 2 scenarios where that really came into play. For instance, sacrificing Flush just to set up a bunch of tail whips on Kangaskhan, only to then use Bite, a special attack. It could have saved us a whole lot of trouble. Overall, I fully recommend this kind of run. This was super fun, and it introduced me to playing with a lot of Pokemon that I would actively avoid because, like I said, I don't like them for one reason or another. And it really changed my opinions on a lot of them too. And now, after this, I can't say I hate all of them anymore. Now whenever I see a Persian, I'm going to think of, oh hey, that's Hairball, man. That was my very last Pokemon in this Nuzlocke I did. So I fully recommend this to anyone, and if you do this kind of run and you still hate a Pokemon after it, maybe that Pokemon just sucks.